I just got the power of a creator. But the next day, I was diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer at the hospital. To stay alive, I transformed the orchard in my hometown into a sandbox world. I tried to speed up the evolution and development of life. All I want is to create a civilization that can cure cancer. The tiny people inside keep exploring the square sandbox. One day they were shocked to discover this world has a round sky and square land. There are even colossal giants tens of thousands of feet tall. When the civilization's development doesn't meet my expectations, I just tear everything down and start over. I'll give every hero of each civilization a chance to ask me a question. Every time they ask how many days I spent creating the world, I think of the scene when I was digging soil to build the sandbox. I spent a full 7 days creating this land. So the legend that God created all things in only 7 days spread across this land from then on. Civilizations keep rising and falling in my sandbox. But who would have thought? So many glorious and brilliant civilizations all originated from a single spore. Back then, I built a 100-acre sandbox in the orchard and dug an artificial diving pond inside it, then turned it into an ocean with the correct salt concentration. In this central ocean, I put in a huge number of Zerg spores and sped up the cell division rate by 10,000 times. Each day in the real world equals 10,000 years in the sandbox. But even so, it was not until the 5th day that these single-celled organisms started to evolve into some plankton. The central ocean became visibly murky, so I quickly set a genetic restriction to limit the body size of the spore organisms. I can't let these creatures evolve too big. On the afternoon of the 6th day, after the first 5 days of Paleozoic ocean with only single cells, multicellular organisms finally appeared in the seawater. In just a few minutes, it looked like a sped-up ecology documentary. Species kept appearing and dying out within seconds, then gave birth to the next generation. But when the sun set, just as I expected, the sandbox world ushered in its first mass species extinction. 12 hours of darkness means that this place will lose sunlight for as long as 5,000 years. Large swathes of aquatic plants withered and sank to the bottom of the sea. Beneath the night sky, there was no sign of life at all. My sandbox environment is too small. The small biological population is not enough to evolve new species that can adapt to the environment. But in my ocean, I have single-celled Zerg organisms with super strong adaptability. Half an hour after the moonlight fell, a faint tinge of blue appeared on the sea, full of dead plant remains. It was a blue plant the size of an ant, shaped like a leaf. I didn't expect that without direct sunlight. This plant actually turned to the moon for photosynthesis. I was absolutely amazed, and named this plant blue silver grass. After this plant survived the first mass extinction, it started to evolve rapidly in just a few seconds. Blue silver grass adapted crazily to the dark environment, spreading flat across the sea like lotus leaves, absorbing moonlight above the yard on a large scale. Another hour later, it went through tens of thousands of generations of evolution and started to form various branches, and even developed 2 differentiated species. Some blue silver grass kept absorbing moonlight to improve their conversion efficiency. The other part actually turned carnivorous. They emit faint fluorescence by absorbing moonlight to attract other blue silver grass and devour them. Watching this, I couldn't help admiring the tenacity and wonder of life. This only surviving aquatic plant actually developed in the dark ocean, its own diverse ecosystem. I had a sudden idea and planned to record all these things. So I quickly found a black notebook, opened to the first page of the Genesis chapter, and wrote down the Dark Martial Era. Heaven and earth changed drastically. The sun set and the moon rose. The world fell into 5,000 years of long darkness. 99% of marine life went extinct. Only blue silver grass survived. In this dark ocean, blue silver grass became the overlord of this era. I looked at the pond that had become an ocean of life and waited silently with expectation. Next came marine animals. What kind of marine animals will my Zerg cells evolve into? I stayed up all night, waiting for dawn. But when the 7th day finally started, all kinds of blue silver grass that thrived at night withered rapidly. Used to the faint moonlight, they looked like they were burned as they sank to the seabed. Blue silver grass started to go extinct on a large scale in an instant. In the afternoon, another tinge of blue gradually came back to life. From the dead colonies, it was a star-shaped blue-silver grass. It underwent its own mutation and successfully survived this mass extinction. To adapt to the intense sunlight environment, it started reproducing generation after generation. In just a few minutes, This species of blue-silver grass died and regenerated for countless generations. It gradually transformed from its original blue color and finally turned into patches of black-blue pentagram-shaped seagrass. I was overwhelmed with mixed feelings and named this new species purple glowgrass. I flipped to the second page of my black notebook and wrote down the light martial era. The world changed abruptly. The moon set and the sun rose. A scorching sun hung in the sky for 5,000 straight years. The blue-silver grass that once survived the dark martial era, as the former dominant species, went extinct on a large scale. The weaker lineage of purple glowgrass rose out of nowhere and became the leading protagonist of this era. Night fell on the 7th day. Purple glowgrass lived peacefully in the ocean and could already withstand 5,000 years of alternating sun and moon. At the same time, the photosynthesis of large amounts of aquatic plants caused the oxygen content of seawater to rise sharply. Conditions suitable for the birth of marine animals were already in place. Soon, single-celled organisms in the ocean began to evolve. The first to appear were a group of black beetle-shaped organisms. From this point on, marine animals stepped onto the historical stage of the evolution era. The moment I saw animals appear, I finally showed a relieved smile. Carrying my exhausted body after staying up for a whole day and night, I went back to my room and fell asleep the second my head hit the pillow. When I woke up, it was already the 8th day of sandbox creation. I found that some marine animals were no longer satisfied with the highly competitive ocean. They evolved into amphibians and lived on the barren coastlines. So I quickly turned to the page right after the light martial era and recorded the 3rd era, the Neogenesis era. All kinds of animals exploded in number. A batch of marine animals entered a golden age of species prosperity. Invertebrates dominated the sea for a time with their hard shells and became the overlords of the era. But they didn't stay dominant for long. Vertebrates were born and defeated them with their advantage of agility and became the overlords of the Neogenesis period. They crawled out of the ocean and would rule over a long era. After finishing writing all this, I silently closed my black notebook. Although the little guys were about to evolve terrestrial creatures, evolving intelligent life would take who knows how much longer. Then I had a sudden bright idea. I planned to drip my own blood into the sandbox. But this idea was way too bold. Being cautious, I decided to experiment with other genes first. I left home and went to the zoo, using a university research project as an excuse. I bought a blood sample from a chimpanzee. When I returned to the orchard, the entire 100-acre miniature sandbox had turned into a small, complete ecological world. Mountains and hills were full of green. Plains were covered with weirdly shaped trees. There were also animals swimming in the rivers. I walked into this huge 100-acre experimental field and finally selected a beetle-shaped species. I placed them into a brand new experimental field that was only 1 square meter in size. After injecting chimpanzee blood, I sped up the flow of time. All those that couldn't survive the blood rejection reaction died. Tens of millions of gakbug species died in just 2 days. I selected from the surviving groups a small batch with the most successful blood fusion and named them Chongyuan. Chongyuan look very similar to humans, but the difference from humans is they have round black armor growing on their backs. Cultivating the Chongyuan took a full 2 days. For the 100-acre orchard sandbox, that was equivalent to 20,000 years passing. Some powerful species emerged. Trees towered into the clouds. A large number of giant species were born, which meant the sandbox had entered a terrifying era similar to the Jurassic period. The largest among them was a walking beast with a black disc on its head. It had already reached the size limit I set, which was the size of a cat. I released the experimentally bred insect ape clan into a large tree-surrounded canyon in the south of the sandbox. I wanted to see how the insect apes would survive in such an era. At the same time, I adjusted the sandbox's time speed to 100 years per day. Early the next morning, I rushed straight to the sandbox to observe that batch of insect apes. To my pleasant surprise, they had already developed a simple tribal communal structure and even gave birth to a simple language and culture. But what worried me was they were far too weak. Their 20,000-year-old ancient genes were simply not enough to fight against the giant beasts 20,000 years later. I would not just stand by and watch the hard-bred insect apes go extinct, so I decided to give them some sparks of civilization. I rush-ordered a miniature guest-greeting pine-potted plant online and custom-made an extremely delicate alloy greatsword that was only slightly thicker than the tip of a needle. When these 2 items were delivered, a day and a half had passed. For the Chongyuan, That was 150 years. By this time, the Chongyuan clan in the sandbox had become increasingly scarce, are on the verge of extinction. I'm actually kind of relieved about that. Surviving 150 years in this era without dying out shows they still have great potential. So I adjusted the time flow rate to 1.1, then stepped into the sandbox. The Chongyuan tribe at this moment was left with broken walls and ruins, and corpses were scattered all over the ground. "Run, we can't even hide here!" "I'm coming." Several male insect apes growled low to tell the women and children behind them to retreat, while waving giant horn clubs made from unknown beasts, and charged at the pitch-black dry beasts ahead, the giant beast called Dark Claws. "We have to stay alive." The women and young insect apes fled all the way, with despair written all over their faces. They seemed to have gotten used to this kind of escape. The few male insect apes that charged earlier had already become food for the Dark Claws by now. Blood splattered everywhere. Watching this scene from afar, I could not bear to see it. The casualties of this primitive tribe are way too heavy. As I strode forward, the fleeing insect apes only felt the ground shaking. In the ancient wild forest full of savage vibes, countless beasts were startled and took flight. Large groups of species fled outwards. Mountains were flattened under my steps. Some powerful species didn't even have time to react. Before they were stomped to death by a foot falling from the sky, I quickly caught up with those fleeing insect ape soldiers. The few Dark Claws that were tearing at insect ape corpses earlier were also casually stomped to death by me. Oh my god, what is that? How can there be a creature that huge? He's bigger than the largest 100-meter giant beast. Dung Overlord 10,000 times bigger even. He actually stomped the terrifying Dark Claw to death with one foot. The insect apes turned their heads to look and saw a towering, enormous creature reaching into the clouds, like an ancient giant piercing through the white clouds in the sky. They screamed out loud and collapsed to the ground instantly. I can understand the language of these insect apes and didn't care about their shock at all. After all, to them, I am the equivalent of the creator. "Run! Hurry up and run!" We can't escape at all. We're only as big as one of his hairs. Countless fleeing insect apes went limp and collapsed on the ground. But while everyone was screaming in terror, a young insect ape stubbornly looked up at the sky and yelled at me. "You giant beast! Are you here to eat us too? You killed my dad and mom. You killed my older brother. Why are we so weak?" I was a little surprised by how brave this young insect ape was, so an idea popped into my head. "Then I'll pick you." I reached out gently and held this insect ape in the palm of my hand. The young insect ape's mind went blank instantly. The giant creature's palm felt like an endless continent, and he was only as big as a fine palm print on that palm. He looked up. The 10,000-foot giant's eyes were like the bright sun in the sky. Because I hid my face from all species inside the sandbox, they could only see my blurry face. Glowing with hazy light, I held this tiny insect ape in one hand. With calm eyes, "Gilgamesh, do you want to change all this?" The young insect ape suddenly started trembling. He screamed loudly on my palm. "You can actually communicate with us. There is actually a 10,000-foot giant with intelligence in this world. Why, do you call me Gilgamesh?" I held him in my palm and lifted him to my eye level and answered calmly. "A name is one of the manifestations of wisdom." Gilgamesh stood on my palm and suddenly got excited. "We can all communicate. We are all intelligent beings. Why won't you save us? You are obviously so powerful. So great and mighty." The insect apes had no idea what kind of existence I was. They only thought I was an intelligent creature similar to a giant beast. I didn't plan on explaining this to them either. I held Gilgamesh in my palm and strode across mountains and rivers. Large areas of trees and creatures were flattened under my feet. I told the tiny insect ape on my palm to look down. My voice was loud and clear, echoing across the whole sky. "Look at this world. Every species is equal. You are the same as every plant and animal out there. Why should I save only you? Is it just because you have intelligence?" Gilgamesh was instantly speechless. Suddenly he started screaming in despair. "Then why did you come to us?" "No one can save you." "And don't expect anyone else to save you. Only you can save yourselves. But I can teach you civilized methods, so you can save yourselves." Gilgamesh stood on the palm of my hand, staring down below in awe. This was his first time looking from above the clouds. At this vast stretch of land, mountains and rivers all lay beneath his eyes. Countless beasts roared and fled under the giant's feet, creating an extremely shocking, spectacular scene. What a gorgeous, magical view from up high. What a terrifying yet awe-inspiring great power. Then he spoke, his voice trembling. What is civilization anyway? I never thought I'd have to explain to this newly born race what civilization really is. So I thought for a second and gave my answer. Civilization is the spark, it's knowledge. It's also order. And most of all, the power intelligent species use to protect themselves. At the words great power, Gilgamesh zoned out for a moment. After I set him on my shoulder, I walked back to the Grand Canyon. Then I took the mini guest greeting pine I bought online out of my backpack and planted it in the soil. It was just a 60-centimeter tall guest greeting pine. But for this tiny land, it was an endless divine tree that reached the clouds. Looking up, clouds and mist swirled around it. The huge twisting canopy stretched on with no end in sight. If you want the power of civilization, show me your courage. Climb up the divine tree. This is my trial for you. A trial of wisdom and courage. As I said that, I placed a custom-made giant metal sword and a kerosene-soaked match on top of the tree. After thinking for a bit, I added another item on the treetop, a capsule containing termite genes. This was a byproduct from when I created the Insect Source clan in a previous experiment. My loud voice rang across the sky again. These are the 3 treasures of civilization. First, the Sword of Judgment. It's the weapon that protects civilization. Unlike the savage species spread all over the land, only species that can use the power of tools qualify as intelligent species. Second, fire. The torch burns with scorching flames. It's the bridge that sustains civilization. Mastering fire is the first step of civilization. Third, the blood of power. Only the bravest warrior in the world can take it. If you survive the baptism of the blood of power, you'll gain unmatched power. If you don't, you'll die. If you want to change the fate of your race, climb the divine tree before the torch goes out to get the 3 treasures of civilization. After I finished speaking, I gently set this little insect ape on the ground. Then, as he watched in shock, I stepped over mountains and rivers and left. The moment I walked out of the orchard, I immediately turned up the sand table's time speed by 100 times. This way, the match that only burns for a few seconds, to the creatures inside the sand table, will burn for several days. Then I used a pair of binoculars and clearly saw the scene under the divine tree. The young Gilgamesh climbed the divine tree with a determined look on his face. In my eyes, this little bug's climbing movements were so fast they were just blurs. He fell countless times in just a few seconds, but kept pushing himself to climb back up. At around the 10-second mark, he finally made it to the top of the divine tree. But in reality, for Gilgamesh inside the sand table, he couldn't remember how long he'd been climbing, or how many times he'd failed. At the peak of the divine tree, standing on the lush green canopy, Gilgamesh held the sword high above his head, as if he was saying something. Then he quickly climbed back down the tree as a blur. I was a little curious, so I used my creation power to replay the scene that just happened on the treetop. I saw Gilgamesh conquer the divine tree, hold the sword of judgment high, and swing it above his head. He looked down at all the living beings under the tree. The bone armor on his back was pitch black and shiny. His determined face was full of confidence. We also have wisdom. In the future, we will be just like that giant wise tree. Every one of our people will have great divine power, and the might to make countless giant beasts run away. I will definitely lead my people to stand at the top and spread the spark of civilization all over the land. The top of the divine tree in the ancient era, this moment was recorded for eternity. Millions of years later, there once existed on this land the oldest Yanli dynasty that was extremely prosperous, yet disappeared as suddenly as it appeared. Archaeologists discovered that the ancestors wrote the Yanli historical anthem for their great king. This oldest document, Genesis, from the Yanli ancient history records, the wise giant beast was 10,000 jang tall. With a sacred face, he came crushing through mountains and rivers, sent down the divine tree, and set up the wisdom trial to give the 3 treasures of civilization to the young hero King Gilgamesh. When I woke up the next morning, the sand table world in the orchard had already gone through a long 100 years. For the worm folk with an average lifespan of 40 to 50 years, that's 2 whole generations. I was kind of looking forward to it. After 2 generations, that young, inexperienced worm folk Gilgamesh from back then, had he died of old age already? The answer is disease source Gilgamesh. Had he died of old age already? The answer was no, he hadn't. He gave me a really big surprise. In the first 10 years after I left, Gilgamesh led the swarm to keep fleeing for their lives. He was amazed that such magical things existed in the world. Fire can cook food, drive away giant beasts at night, and provide warmth on cold nights. No wonder the wise giant beast said, "Fire represents the origin of civilization." And that sort of judgment in this ancient giant forest was an invincible weapon. Gilgamesh used the Sharpie, weapon to slay countless ferocious beasts, allowing his people to barely survive, and finally gain the power to fight back. In the second 10-year period, Gilgamesh was no longer young and inexperienced, and was in his 30s. He grew tall and majestic, becoming the strongest hunter of the Worm-Ape clan, and was called the Hero King by the tribe. He even used fire to burn the land, to make it fertile, and started primitive farming. He was extremely arrogant, proud and domineering, and thought he was superior to everyone else. The wise giant beast gave him the 3 treasures of civilization. He knew clearly that civilization is the inheritance of knowledge and history. So he boldly created cuneiform writing to record the race's history, and innovated the language. He thought he was the first wise man to build a civilized world. So he recorded the history of him creating civilization in books and wrote odes for it, and shamelessly named it Genesis. He was a tyrannical ruler, autocratic and dictatorial, but also extremely charismatic. He had 131 wives in the tribe, who bore him offspring. Most of these offspring were strong and powerful, and inherited his burly build and wisdom. But the wormfolk only have an average lifespan of 30 to 40 years. Gilgamesh was already in his 30s by this time. The hero king who once swung the sword of judgment, bold and unconstrained, had also entered his old age. Inside the wooden treehouse, fire was blazing in the fireplace. Gilgamesh sat calmly on a huge chair, woven from dark claw beast fur, staring at the fire and murmuring to himself, "That's the civilized flame, the wise giant beast bestowed upon me. It's so beautiful and gorgeous, like a leaping fiery red stamen." Gilgamesh's entire tall and burly body had already grown old. He turned his head to look at the giant beast heads hanging on the wall. These are the remains of all kinds of giant beasts on this land. He had lived a sufficiently glorious life, sufficiently splendid, and fulfilled his youthful dreams. He was content. The next tribe chief had already been decided. It was his son, Altria, whose ability was no worse than his, and could lead the entire clan to continue its glory. Gilgamesh could clearly feel his life was gradually coming to an end. Death is inevitable for all living beings. He had almost resigned to his fate. Then he silently took out the power vessel from years ago, and sighed. "There's nothing left to worry about now." The wise giant beast said back then, "Only the bravest warrior in the world can take this 3rd treasure." Am I the bravest warrior in the world? Let's find out. The hero was in his twilight years. His cloudy eyes widened slightly. In a trance, he remembered the glorious years of his life. He suddenly straightened up slightly. In a trance, he recalled the glorious years of his life. Tears suddenly fell from his eyes. He silently pierced his arm and poured the power blood into the wound. Extreme pain hit him. Gilgamesh struggled and fell to the ground. This late-stage hero had gone through countless battles in his life, but had never gasped so violently in such pain. In the end, he survived the near-death experience and slowly stood up. His long hair had lost its original color and turned completely silver white. His face was as perfect and young as a god's. "What is this power inside the treehouse?" A tall, burly, white-haired young man murmured to himself. "Power blood. What an incredible power this is." Gilgamesh could now clearly feel the endless power surging inside his body. At the same time, back at the tribe, Gilgamesh's son, Artoria, was standing on a high place, holding the sword of rupture Ea high, to announce he would succeed as chief. Artoria is wise and courageous, with both great talent and good moral character. Compared to his cruel and arrogant father, he is way more qualified to be a kind chief. Gilgamesh knew this very well, so he was willing to pass the position to him when he grew old. But everything is different now. Artoria is very kind, and deeply loved by all the people. He has full respect for his father, and never thought of seizing his father's position. But Gilgamesh still won't allow any hidden risks to exist. "I'm back. The chief is still me." Blood was spilled that day. Wails echoed all over the Yanli tribe. The hero king Gilgamesh took the chief position again, starting his second life. In the first decade after Gilgamesh started his second life, he led people to build houses with stones. The Chongyuan clan officially entered the Stone Age of resisting giant beasts. Without using the power blood, Gilgamesh gained termite genes. He could easily uproot 100-year-old giant trees and had the power to move mountains. He led the people to fight against giant beasts. After 13 years of fighting, he chose to challenge the scariest existence on this land, the 100-meter giant beast Fenba, known as the strongest being in the world. Fenba was the dominant king of the giant beast era on this continent. It is also the creature that once evolved to the maximum size limit of my sandbox. Gilgamesh fought Fenba for 3 days and 3 nights. The earth cracked. Canyons collapsed. Countless giant beasts fled in the forest. Gilgamesh was covered in blood that day, holding Ea in one hand, dragging the corpse of the 100-meter giant beast Fenba back with the other. The power of his single hand could even drag Fenba's corpse, which was as huge as a towering hill. People from countless tribes were proud of him and were extremely shocked. They wrote praises for him. To sing of his great power, this is the strongest hero king in history. I want to found a country. The moment he came back, looking at the people of the Stone tribe, he suddenly said this. The tribe boiled with excitement instantly. People cried tears of joy. They knew clearly that under the leadership of this great hero king, the days of wandering and suffering were over. They no longer had to fear the brutality of giant beasts. A new era of civilization had begun. History is written by the victors. Gilgamesh did not record the atrocities of his 4 sons, but recorded his bravery in the Genesis. In the Yanli dynasty, his bravery is recorded. Historical records of the Yanli dynasty say Gilgamesh took the power blood, killed the legendary giant beast Fenba, moved huge boulders to surround the city, and built the first city-state in history, Huntstone City. Time kept passing. Gilgamesh, who was unrivaled across the whole land, began to devote himself to developing civilization. He worked hard to govern the country. He was extremely charming because of me, but also tyrannical and extremely arrogant. He created currency, improved the language system, built cities, but also cruelly divided people into different social classes. He wasted manpower and resources, sending a large number of warriors to explore the boundaries of the world. He is the great hero king of the people, but also an out-and-out tyrant. In the 87th year of the Yanli dynasty, Gilgamesh was 127 years old. Lishi Royal City had a terrifying population of over 10 million. Countless slaves were traded here. They even built a coliseum. Nobles took pleasure in the fights there. The original tribal people had already passed away. Hundreds of years passed. The later generations no longer remembered the hardships and struggles their ancestors once had. They gradually became corrupt in comfort. However, the former king of Yanli was still as brave as ever. In the dark and dim Lion King Hall, a tall and handsome man calmly stood in front of the exquisite bone throne. The legendary sword Aya was always by his side. Great King of Yanli, Your Majesty Gilgamesh, Lord of the City-States, we have finished exploring the entire land. The royal minister, Hanming the Star Envoy, bent slightly and talked about these excitedly. The entire land. The royal minister, Hanming the Star Envoy, bent slightly and talked excitedly about the experiences of these years. What is our world like? Gilgamesh stared at the minister in front of him. His sharp gaze seemed to pierce right through the bright blue sky beyond the palace. Back then, the warriors who explored the world, departed from all corners of the land, spent as long as several decades on the journey. Countless people died or got injured during the trip, and we finally learned the shape of the whole world today. Han Ming gestured respectfully and dramatically as he spoke. Our world has a round sky and a square earth. The sky is an infinitely high and vast arc. The ground is a perfect square. There is a huge ocean in the center, surrounded by mountains, rivers, and streams. On this incredibly vast land, even if you ride the fastest flying behemoth in a straight line, it still takes over 20 years to reach the 2 ends of the world. Gilgamesh on the throne was silent for a moment before speaking. All right, you may leave now. Yes, Your Majesty. Han Ming stood up and left. He suddenly paused, turned around and glanced at their king with adoration. This great hero king led them out of the caves, built tribes from scratch, progressed from the agrarian era to the Stone Age, and then entered the city-state era. He killed Fenba, the most terrifying king of behemoths, and led one civilization era after another. Over 30 years ago, Han Ming was still a young ranger when he was summoned to the imperial palace by His Majesty and ordered to draw a geographical map of the city-states. It was not until 30 years later, when he returned to Martyr King City and completed his mission, that he was no longer a young man, but a shaky, frail old man with cloudy, dim eyes. He did not have much time left to live, but His Majesty still looked exactly the same as before, with no trace of time passing on him at all. What an incredibly great monarch he is. Han Ming's body trembled, his eyes blazing with fanaticism. For the past 100+ years, His Majesty has not shown his power to the public. No one knows how powerful he has become now. Maybe in the future, this long-lived, immortal, eternal king will lead the Yanli people into the next civilization era. Our world has a round sky and a square earth. When the palace was completely empty, Gilgamesh thought of this sentence and sighed for a long time. He gently stroked the giant sword next to him, as if it were his lover who had accompanied him for endless years. I have already mastered the power of the torch. I have also fully understood the blood of power, but I have searched the whole world for the sword of rupture, and still haven't found out how it was forged, Gilgamesh whispered, stroking the sword blade in complete shock. What on earth is this made of? Is it the bone of some giant beast, or the craftsmanship of some unknown civilization? Sadly, this world is not the real world after all. I did not bury any ore in the sandbox, so the civilizations in the sandbox can only stay stuck in the Stone Age forever. In their understanding of the world, the word metal will never exist. For this world, this shiny, indestructible material is mysterious, powerful, and one of a kind. They even reached the end of the world, but still couldn't find that great wise. Powerful and one of a kind, they even reached the end of the world, but still couldn't find that great wise behemoth from back then. Where on earth does it live in this world? The civilization owned by the wise behemoth is simply unfathomable. This sword of rupture, gifted to me, is the most precious treasure I have ever gotten. But this holy sword that created the entire civilization is also a warning to me, isn't it? The power called civilization. I have only mastered a part of it. Everything else is still unknown. Just like the secret of how this sword was forged. It already fills me with deep fear. The sword of rupture is like a sword of Damocles, hanging right above my head with its tip pointed down. It could fall at any time and take my life away. Oh, the power of civilization. It is really so fascinating. Gilgamesh sat on the throne, like a slumbering lion that had been lying down for ages, his eyes slowly gazing into the distance. In a trance, he remembered the long-distant days over 100 years ago. That tall, huge figure back then, a colossal giant that was tens of thousands of feet tall, glowing all over his body, born to be sacred. His large palm holding the young him, overlooking all the mountains and rivers in the world, and gave him the 3 treasures of civilization. It was a scene he would never forget in his life. It is still vivid in his mind, like it just happened yesterday. Sadly, my life is coming to an end again. The blood of power doesn't work on me anymore. I want to live a third life. Great wise giant tree, I want to see you again. Sadly, at this time, I am chatting and eating with the little girl from the neighbor's house. I didn't hear Gilgamesh's prayer. Of course, even if I did, I wouldn't pay him any attention. Creatures meant to die of old age will eventually pass away that way. No one can live forever. Gilgamesh has already lived a life that even I find incredibly enviable, such a legendary life, glorious for his entire lifetime, watched and admired by all people. What else could he possibly have to regret? But I ended up underestimating how desperate Gilgamesh was to keep living. After going through the terror of death and rebirth once, he became completely terrified of death. This heroic monarch wanted to live a third lifetime. Year 102 of the Yanli dynasty. Gilgamesh turned 142 years old. This legendary king, who already lived 3 times longer than ordinary citizens, started to look visibly old. He was totally shocked. His rage shook the entire kingdom. He immediately issued an edict to mobilize all national resources to find the wisdom behemoth. At the same time, he summoned all talented people across the land to make elixirs and research dark magic. In no time, large numbers of behemoths in the primeval forests were slaughtered. All their body parts were used for experiments. The once extremely prosperous Darkclaw clan was almost wiped out because of this. History entered the well-known era of tyrannical city-states. 13 years later, a court dark wizard created a kind of longevity potion, which successfully extended Gilgamesh's life. But drug resistance developed quickly. It no longer worked after being taken multiple times. Gilgamesh then slowly headed towards an irreversible decline and death. Death is unavoidable for all living creatures. Even the greatest heroes are no exception. Year 145 of the Yanli dynasty. Another 30-plus years passed. Gilgamesh could feel his life fading away rapidly. This sturdy old man sat motionless on his throne. He closed his eyes and mumbled to himself, "My life is about to end. I clearly don't want to die yet." After sitting still for 3 days, he finally opened his aged eyes. He chose to accept the passage of time and started selecting candidates for the next king. The entire dynasty erupted in commotion instantly. The great king is dying. The long-living, supposedly immortal hero, King Gilgamesh, is actually reaching the end of his life too, but no one dared to step forward at first. The last time Gilgamesh was aging, he named his most trusted son, Artoria, as the next leader, but killed him with his own hands after he gained his second life. Everyone was scared of being the next Artoria, but Gilgamesh truly lived up to his reputation as the smartest king. He gave a direct order. The throne candidate will receive the blood of power and possess great power equal to mine. You don't have to be afraid of me. And you will be granted the right to lead your subordinates, to build a second royal city outside the capital. You will be granted the power crab and be permitted to build your own city. As soon as the news came out, the entire nation was shocked. Countless merchants, slaves, civilians, nobles, and craftsmen swarmed to the front of the royal palace. In the end, even though countless people passed the trial, they died from rejection of the blood of power. Only the forest warrior Likidu and the steppe barbarian general Randar were the two who received the blood of power and survived. They each built their own city-state. 2 next-generation kings with the blood of power had emerged. They were about to take over the royal power and replace the dying Gilgamesh, to guide the next generation of Yanli civilization. This civilization started with Gilgamesh, but it cannot end with him. Year 175 of the Yanli dynasty. 3 kings ruled side by side and governed the land together. The Yanli city-states entered an unprecedented golden age. Gilgamesh suddenly felt that death was fully upon him. He started his final struggle. He summoned craftsmen to build a wisdom behemoth temple far more exquisite than the Lion Hunter King's palace. Inside the huge stone temple stood a tall, majestic giant statue. The vast, towering giant, bathed in light, held the young hero King Gilgamesh in one hand. His eyes were slightly blue. Looking down over the entire land, his whole body emitted an astonishing pale gray divinity. That day, Gilgamesh led all his ministers and all his millions of subjects. The entire nation worshipped the wisdom behemoth, hoping that the great Lord of Wisdom would sense his sincerity. "If I can see the wisdom behemoth one more time before I die," tears suddenly streamed down Gilgamesh's aged face. It had been almost 100 years. The dying Gilgamesh led all the court ministers to worship at the temple, to beg to see the wisdom behemoth for the second time. "Oh, great wisdom behemoth, Gilgamesh wants to see you again?" This hero king's sincere devotion was only to see again the mysterious wisdom behemoth that once gave him 3 famous precious treasures. Because the commotion was so huge, I was out for a walk with my neighbor's little sister at the time. Suddenly I received a message from the Genesis mainframe. I sighed a little, but I still decided to go meet this old acquaintance. Plus, it's time I stopped the Chongyuan clan. I didn't expect after I sped up the sandbox's time flow. In just a few days, they've destroyed countless ecosystems in the sandbox, wiped out tons of species, and all of this is just for Gilgamesh's crazy dream of immortality. I reset the sandbox's time flow back to normal, then strode right into the sandbox world. To all the creatures in the sandbox at this moment, the ground was shaking slightly. Mountains, rivers, lands, and oceans all seemed to be trembling. Trees were getting trampled. Huge footprints were left in the valleys. Countless beasts in the dense forest were fleeing for their lives, and gradually, the entire Martyr King city also started to shake slightly. What's going on? Is the city going to collapse? Right now, Gilgamesh was leading all his officials to worship the wisdom statue. Suddenly, he seemed to sense something. The old face of this great hero king showed childlike joy for the very first time. After 200 years, the great Lord of Wisdom I saw when I was little, that giant wisdom beast who gave our civilization 3 treasures. He's finally back. I stared at the giant, cracked stone city that holds up to tens of millions of people, and I was slightly amazed, though in my eyes, it's only the size of a basketball court. It was built by those tiny insect folks after all. It's already extremely magnificent and grand. I looked down at the delicate altars and temples in the city. Under the tall statue, the snow-white aged hero king was looking up, holding the sword of rupture in his hand,
staring at me with glistening tears in his eyes.
I looked down at this white-haired old man with tears all over his face, and felt a little emotional. That young, naive insect kid I once held in, the palm of my hand back then, that hot-blooded teenager who stood on top of the giant tree, growling at the sky with the sword of rupture in his hand. He's already in his twilight years, approaching the end of his life. But his ambitious, youthful look feels like it was just yesterday. Gilgamesh. How have you been all these years? I spoke softly, my voice cut through the vast clouds, and drifted down to the prosperous lion-hunting king city below. Gilgamesh leaned on his holy sword, and trembled all over. I've been doing okay, I guess. His voice was dry and hoarse. Staring at the sky, this giant that reached up into the clouds, even if this wasn't his first time seeing me, he was still struck by this magnificent sight. The 10,000 jang tall giant pierced straight through the clouds. His torso seemed to hold up the entire world. Bright, glowing light covered his face. Pure and holy light faintly seeped out from the clouds, so no one could see his majestic face clearly. The giant looked down at the entire blazing stone city. Great, solemn, and holy. No word in the world could describe that breathtakingly beautiful sight. Oh, my God, he actually exists. All 10 million people in the city. Whether they were merchants in fancy leather clothes, or ragged slaves, all civilians and craftsmen put down whatever they were doing, walked out of their houses, stood on the streets and looked up at the huge giant that pierced through the sky. This is the legendary giant wisdom beast that granted our civilization to us. He really is a 10,000 jang tall supergiant. What an incredible great being, comparable to the sun, moon, and stars in the sky. Everyone was immersed in shock. Their minds went blank. Longing, fear, shock, all kinds of complicated emotions tangled together, and finally turned into unparalleled admiration. Gilgamesh looked at the palace officials around him, their equally shocked faces, and let out a soft laugh. He remembered when he was young, the first time he saw the giant wisdom tree, he felt exactly the same horrified shock. He was silent for a moment. Gilgamesh looked up, his eyes full of desire. Giant wisdom tree, you... Desire filling his eyes. Giant wisdom tree. The civilization heritage you gave me over 100 years ago. I've already fulfilled it. 10,000 meters up in the sky. I, the vast giant who seemed to have crossed eternity, my voice cut through the clouds, and fell onto the blazing Lion King city below. Your great achievements will be recorded in the Yanli epic Genesis that you had your people compile. You will be the greatest first-generation hero king in the entire history of Yanli civilization. Gilgamesh. Future generations will sing praises of you, glory for thousands of years after your death, living in the epics that are passed down from generation to generation. That's not what I want. Gilgamesh suddenly got excited. Then what do you want? I want eternal life just like you. Gilgamesh looked up at the towering giant that reached into the clouds. He craved it more than anything. I'm willing to give up everything I have and pay any price. Please give me the treasure that grants immortality. I really fell silent after hearing his words. At this very moment, this king already had almost everything that existed in the whole world. Glory, power, wealth. Even the entire world belonged to him. But he still wasn't satisfied. I want immortality too. I've got a terminal illness right now. I could die at any moment. I'm so jealous of Gilgamesh's magnificent life. His life story is like a real epic. Gilgamesh, you are way too greedy. I don't have any treasure that grants eternal life. I looked calmly at this aging king. Birth, aging, illness, and death of all species are the law of nature. I can't change that. At the end of one's life, everyone wants to keep living. Status and position mean nothing at this moment. The boundaries of countless civilizations are crossed. No matter emperors or mole crickets, the boundaries of several civilizations are crossed. No matter if you're an emperor or an ant, everyone ends up as bones under the dirt in the end. I took a deep look at Gilgamesh, then looked down at the dynasty below with great emotion. No, that's impossible. Gilgamesh squeezed out the words in a hoarse voice, staring at the sacred face surrounded by clouds and mist in the sky. No, you're lying to me. You can do it, Kunming can do it. He stared at me with burning eyes, as towering and majestic as a mountain range. His body is as strong as a solid rock. Over 200 long years have passed. Even he who took the blood of power has grown old. but time has never left any trace on this great giant's body at all. Time feels like just yesterday to him. He thinks the wisdom behemoth is immortal. What an incredible power this is. What a desirable long lifespan this is. Gilgamesh's lips were trembling. Suddenly he threw his head back and roared. Then you came in response to my call. Did you come to watch me die? A humble, pathetic life. Dying of old age while trembling with fear. Gilgamesh, I came to send you off. I don't have the power to extend your lifespan. I'm also here for the second handover of civilization and to issue a warning. I sighed and continued speaking. Your civilization is way too cruel. You've wiped out all surrounding creatures, destroyed forests, slaughtered giant beasts. The entire continent has been trampled by you. A real civilization isn't about cruelty, nor is it about savagery. I demand you stop all the killing. Stop the killing. Though old, Gilgamesh was still strong and healthy. He suddenly stood up shakily. There seemed to be a flame burning in his eyes, growing brighter and brighter. This white-haired old man suddenly grew more and more vigorous. This white-haired old man suddenly took a step forward. The killing will never stop. My march forward will never stop either.
Do you know that all these years?
This sword of rupture you gave me has been hanging right above my head. It gave me immense power, but it also brought me unparalleled fear. But today I'm going to pull this sword hanging over my head out myself. Where is the historian? The historian in charge of compiling the Genesis stepped forward at the sound. Write down the history of our civilization at this very moment. I'll speak, you write. On the red wooden desk, the humble historian silently picked up his quill and unrolled a roll of gray animal skin paper. Please speak, Your Majesty. The history of human beings fighting against nature is a history of courage and glory. The original reason I ordered people to compile Genesis was to leave history for future generations. Now let history record my courage at this moment. Let future generations understand the courage of their ancestors to fight against nature. Gilgamesh took a heavy, rough breath. His old body was leaning on the sword of rupture laughing in a low voice. Then he said loudly, 175th year of the Yanli dynasty. After slaying the strongest legendary giant beast Fen in history, the hero who became king and ruled for over 100 years after dominating the world, Gilgamesh takes action once again. We use the power of the entire nation to lure the high and mighty wisdom behemoth to appear, and I am ready to swing my sword at the wisdom behemoth and kill it. I silently looked down at everything happening below. I felt complicated and surprised. Watching all of this, I felt mixed emotions and shock. Last time, the crown prince. This time he's gonna kill a god. But I quickly calmed down. Gilgamesh's move seems recklessly bold. It actually makes total sense. The first time he was on the brink of death, after the hero king came back to life, he killed his favorite son with his own hands. The second time he was at death's door, he chose to raise his sword at me, the one who granted him 3 famous treasures that built his reputation. Maybe I should have realized this from the very start, when I picked from a group of shivering worm larvae, one brave little larva that dared to roar at a colossal giant, and question it back when it was young. I should have known what that would lead to. He has never known fear in his entire life, so it's only natural he draws his sword on me now. It's just in his nature. I said with a calm expression, Gilgamesh, I'm warning you for the last time. Stop this reckless act of yours right now. This is savagery, not civilization. Your next move is going to make you pay an extremely heavy price. There's no price worse than death itself. Gilgamesh slowly opened his bright red eyes, as if he was back in his youth again, showing that long-lost fiery recklessness from his younger days, just like when I killed Femba back then, with the resolve to die if I failed. Today I will kill the wisdom giant tree, steal its civilization, seize its power to achieve true immortality. I will lead my people to challenge the gods. Gilgamesh let out a deafening roar. This is the first ever clash between 2 civilizations. One intelligent civilization is challenging another one-of-a-kind wisdom giant beast. Even if you once guided our civilization, you're blocking our path forward now. He raised his sword high, the gale blowing his silver messy hair wildly, when all of a sudden, a distant bell rang out across the entire royal city. The entire blazing lion royal city erupted instantly. An army of hundreds of thousands poured out, forming a tight, orderly formation. I watched this scene unfold and sighed. Turns out, over 10 years ago already, Gilgamesh had already prepared to attack the wisdom giant beast. Today was just a trap to lure me out.
If I don't agree to his terms?
He'll bring his men to kill me. He's both brave and resourceful. From that point of view, he really is a great tyrant. At the same time, in a distant giant city on the plain, Randall, the grassland's barbarian general, stood calmly in front of the palace. Even from very far away, he could still see the giant that towered into the clouds. What an imposing, huge, and perfect life form. While Randall was still in shock, his pupils constricted slightly. It's time to make our move. If he wasn't looking for allies, with how dictatorial and ruthless King Gilgamesh is, there's no way he'd hand the precious blood of power to anyone else. He planned for this moment from the very start. Randall drew his sword sharply, showing the fierce courage of a grasslands barbarian, and shouted loudly, "March out! History will remember this great moment. 175th year of the Yanli dynasty. The people of Yanli will slay the wisdom giant beast and return after drinking the blood of immortality. Meanwhile, on the divine tree near the royal capital, this ancient sky-reaching tree that was once used to test the 3 civilization treasures, sky-reaching ancient tree, now holds a bustling giant forest city. At the top of the divine tree, Likidu, the forest warrior, leaned on a wooden cane, quietly staring at the terrifying giant piercing the clouds in the distance. Several of his disciples and mentors stood quietly behind him. It's time to leave. We made a promise to the king. We should keep it, someone reminded in a low voice. No, we from Likidu's giant forest city choose to do nothing. Likidu sighed. Even looking at the royal city from such a far distance, that terrifying aura from the giant still weighed heavily on his chest, making it hard to breathe. Master, are you scared? A straightforward disciple couldn't help asking. The 3 great royal cities, the 3 strongest kings of Yanli are joining forces. Even the legendary wisdom giant beast might not be unbeatable. I'm not scared. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of abandoning something more important than life. My civilization and wisdom won't allow me to slaughter the wisdom giant tree like a brutal beast, the one that gave us our civilization and saved our entire race. Without gratitude and morality, we would be no different from wild animals. The disciples fell silent. Their master was one of the strongest leaders of the 3 royal cities. He received the blood of power and survived to become a great forest hero. But now he's chosen to defy the royal decree. I defied the order by refusing to join the battle, so my crime is unforgivable. Chop off my head. If His Majesty the King wins, take my head to the royal palace. I'm guilty of defying the imperial decree. With His Majesty's tyrannical dictatorship, I was already doomed to die. This was all my idea alone. I beg your Majesty not to punish the royal city. If the wisdom behemoth wins, then take my head and hand it to the wisdom behemoth. Pray for the great giant's forgiveness. Let the wisdom behemoth know that we still have true inheritors of civilization and are not completely savage. I beg him not to completely wipe out our race and leave us a glimmer of hope. Teacher. Likidu stood at the top of the sacred tree and opened his arms calmly. Xuanzhou was silent for a moment, then hardened his heart. Blood burst forth. He personally cut off Likidu's head, one of the strongest heroes of the Yanli civilization. Spirit King Likidu did not resist at all before his death. Xuanzhou looked at Likidu's head, with that calm, familiar face on it, and silently wrapped it in animal hide. Suddenly his heart ached. He vaguely knew that something extremely important in his life was slowly shattering. Countless arrows were fired simultaneously from the ground. This is Yanli's most elite army, but to me they're just a bunch of ants. Although their arrows are sharp, they have too little strength. Swords and spears stabbed into my thick jeans and didn't even touch my skin. Even the most elite army can't pierce his clothes. I should have guessed this long ago. My elite army that conquered forests and countless behemoths is totally useless in front of the wisdom behemoth. Just as he finished speaking, Gilga is completely useless. Just as he finished speaking, Gilgamesh jumped suddenly. He flashed to my knees in the blink of an eye. I couldn't help being slightly shocked. That's so fast. An ant can be like a flea and burst out such terrifying jumping power. That's really impressive. I swatted with my hand, but I didn't expect this sword-wielding, old heroic king to dodge nimbly. Gilgamesh kept moving at high speed, jumping nimbly left and right. Climbing up my jeans, his face was extremely serious. Is this the wisdom behemoth? Even the wind, from his every move, almost blew me away. Your Majesty, Randall is here to support you. Randall, the barbarian general of the grasslands, has also arrived. He made a light leap and jumped as high as 7 or 8 meters and climbed onto my pant leg. I reached out to grab Randall, facing the palm as huge as a mountain. This grassland king was also equally nimble. He has fought countless battles against behemoths for years and has superb combat skills, worthy of the title of grassland king. You two are pretty good, but the test ends here. With that, I suddenly stretched out my palm and swatted at Randall at top speed. Randall's face changed drastically. He had no time to react and flew backwards instantly. The next second, I swatted again quickly and struck at Gilgamesh with overwhelming force. Damn it. How could he? Gilgamesh's face was filled with shock. He could only react for a split second and swung an amazing sword to block in front of him. My palm hit the sword blade. He flew backwards entirely and fell rapidly. He was defeated in just one move. Just one move. And he was defeated. Scratch his skin. Gilgamesh, who fell to the ground, laughed miserably and coughed up a lot of blood. I looked at this outstanding hero with emotion. Although he was defeated, he never showed any fear from start to finish, even knowing the strength gap between us was like a chasm. Gilgamesh, this complex and powerful man, has great personal charm, arrogant, domineering, and full of pride. Now that the hero is in his twilight years, it makes me feel a little pity and regret. But the end of his lifespan is something I really can't change. Randall was also coughing up a lot of blood at this time, his chest heaving violently. He looked at the giant in the sky. There was also no fear in his eyes. He had accepted death from the very beginning. Yanling warriors never fear death. He just laughed miserably. The gap is that big. What the hell are we even waging war against? Do you regret it now? I sighed softly. My whole body was covered in golden light. My huge body towered into the clouds, like a giant spanning all of eternity. Mysterious and majestic. Regret it? No. It's just a choice, that's all. Gilgamesh coughed up mouthfuls of blood. Didn't say another word. At this moment, the Yanli civilization was defeated, challenging such a colossal giant in front of the wise behemoth. They knew exactly what defeat meant. An apocalyptic disaster is coming. I turned to look at the fleeing army. Screams of madness filled the entire area. Annihilation, genocide. The Chongyuan kept wailing. Some were terrified, others laughed maniacally in despair. They'd clearly lost their minds. I never wanted to control the fates of so many people, laughing maniacally. They'd clearly gone completely insane. I never wanted to control the fates of so many people, or control the rise of a civilization. I looked down at this aging hero king and spoke calmly. Are we going to be destroyed? Just like how we wiped out countless behemoth races. Will you destroy us? To avenge them. I stared at him quietly. His civilization was about to fall, but there was still no trace of fear on his face right now. I thought for a moment. I replied, since you refuse to listen to my advice, I will destroy you. You've destroyed the entire world's ecosystem. You've wiped out too many species. I can't just let you be and keep reproducing endlessly. Gilgamesh gave a relieved smile when he heard that. Back then you answered my question about what civilization is. Can you answer a few more questions for me one last time? Our king is actually asking the wise behemoth to answer his own question. Everyone around held their breath, all looking up at the 10,000-foot giant. The air went still for a few seconds. The behemoth was also silent. Then suddenly, an extremely deep voice cut through the vast clouds and fell upon the shattered Lion's Roar royal city below. Ask your question? For a moment, the whole world went dead silent. The blood-soaked ground fell completely silent. Countless fleeing soldiers stopped in their tracks. They turned back to look up at the giant in the sky. How will you destroy us? I will use water. After thinking for a moment, I added calmly, I will use a massive flood to wash away and submerge this entire civilization. I will erase all traces you have left behind. In an instant, the whole world fell silent. Everyone was too terrified. Of this entire civilization, I will erase all traces you have left behind. In an instant, the whole world fell silent. Everyone was too scared to even make a sound. The ground is too filthy. It's full of sinful people. So the wise behemoth will use a massive flood to cleanse this land of sinful people. But no matter how powerful the wise behemoth is, how can he unleash a flood that covers the entire world? This isn't the power of a behemoth anymore. This is clearly Everyone was breathing rapidly. Their faces were filled with horror. For a moment, they couldn't think of a word to describe this legendary wise behemoth. Second question, this world has a domed sky and flat earth. Why have you never left any trace here before? Where do you come from exactly? What exactly is the wise behemoth? Why did you give us the spark of civilization? And why did you stop us from slaughtering other races? You said all living beings are equal. Savage species, intelligent species, even plants are all equal. So what exactly is this land to you? I lowered my head slightly. I looked at this doomed hero king in front of me. The giant looked down at the entire Bluestone City. A vast voice boomed across the land. This land is the world I created. All of you are my children. Savage species, intelligent species, plants, all species are my children to me. That's why all of you are equal. Dead silence. The air felt like it had frozen solid. All the people on the ground were breathing rapidly. The sound of breathing grew louder, turning into waves of sharp, panicked gasps. Gilgamesh was also struck speechless in an instant. His face was full of incredulity. He suddenly started laughing. His smile grew wider and wider, until it turned into wild, arrogant laughter. Funny, this is so funny. What the hell have we been fighting against this whole time? Turns out the legendary wise behemoth is only a behemoth in our minds. He's not actually a behemoth at all. He's the omnipotent Lord that created all things, the creator who made the whole world. A being like this should be called a god. The tribal people on this land never had a concept of God before, but now they do. I was once arrogant enough to record my creations. I named the book recording Civilization History Genesis. I thought I created the civilized world, but actually, the real creator is the wisdom behemoth. All living beings are his people. What an incredibly magnificent power this is. How dare I even try to... Gilgamesh's voice cut off abruptly. Then he burst into wild laughter that reached the sky. He laughed more and more recklessly. I fell silent in my heart. The towering giant that reaches into the clouds stood at the edge of the royal city, quietly watching this laughing, defeated hero king. I've always had a good temper, so of course I tolerate his impudence and dying madness. One last question. How many days did you take to create our world? Gilgamesh asked abruptly. This question really made me fall into deep thought. Back then, to turn the orchard into a sand table, I dug the soil. This question really made me fall into deep thought. Back then, to turn the orchard into a sand table, I dug the soil and shaped the mountains and rivers. It took me a full 1 week to finish modifying this square land. So I answered truthfully. It took me exactly 7 days to create this land. 7 days? The god created all things in only 7 days. Gilgamesh was stunned. He prostrated on the ground and laughed, tears streaming down his face from laughing. He laughed hysterically. For a moment, he seemed to hear something shatter inside his heart. It was the sound of a broken heart. His pride and arrogance were completely shattered before his death. There is no greater grief than the death of the heart. 7 days. His consciousness completely blurred amid his wild laughter. In a trance, he remembered his childhood. Standing on the giant's huge palm, the first question he asked this giant, what is civilization? Civilization is a kindling, it is knowledge, and it is order. Civilization is also the strongest power that intelligent species use to protect themselves. Gilgamesh's laughter grew louder and louder. It drifted through the breeze and over the hills. Across rivers and woods, all the insect people on this land all raised their heads in a trance, as if they all heard the epitaph song of the king of Yanli. Countless people cried and wailed, singing unknown Yanli mourning songs, folk laments and elegies for the fall of the great king. On this day, at the edge of the sun-blazing royal city, a generation's great epic hero, King Gilgamesh, came to the end of his life and turned into dust of history. I sighed. Watching this hero king pass away, I never wanted to fight for anything. What you wanted? The questions you wanted to ask? I answered all of them truthfully. It's just that I really don't have the power to make you immortal. I'm even on the verge of death myself. Why did you push yourself so hard? The king is dead, our king, the strongest hero in history, King Gilgamesh. He drew his sword against the creator. He's dead, we lost the war. Countless insect sources wailed and fled in panic. I silently looked down at all this. Where can these insect sources even run to? The border of the world. Unbelievable. This is truly unbelievable. The historian cried bitterly as he stood on the towering wall of the martyr royal city. Watching the great hero king be defeated and die, he broke out in cold sweat after learning the terrifying truth. I must, before I die. Write down everything. I will leave the truth about the world for future generations. The historian was trembling all over. Sweat soaked his arms. He had just written down, the feat of Gilgamesh challenging the wisdom behemoth. Then he tremblingly turned to the next page of the book and quickly wrote down the new chapter. Genesis Yanli Kingdom. Chapter records that the Yase, wisdom behemoth, is actually the creator. In his later years, Gilgamesh was arrogant and conceited. He tried to draw his sword against the Lord, to obtain immortality with the god's blood. He finally angered the god. The god saw that people on earth were extremely sinful and decided to destroy the Yanli civilization. He will send the apocalyptic great flood to destroy all living beings. The sky is shaking. The ground is wailing amid the anxious atmosphere in the royal city. People are panicking and trembling. Panic is spreading everywhere. Repent. The god will bring his wrath upon us, crush our arms, and break our spines. The great flood will destroy our world and wipe out our civilization. And right at this moment, a young man carrying a package with bright blonde hair came right to my feet. He opened his package, revealed the head inside, and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Oh, great wisdom giant tree, Forest King Likidu, we come to pray and apologize." I froze for a second. Only 2 of the 3 kings showed up. The Forest King is not here with them. Xuanze knelt down to Bi and pressed his face firmly against the ground. We Yanli people aren't just all savages. Our mentor Likidu already used his own death to prove that point. He'd rather disobey the royal order than raise his sword at the benefactor who gave us our civilization. Not all of us are evil. When you send down divine punishment, God, please leave the Yanli people a final glimmer of hope. After hearing about the Forest King's righteous act, I sighed. Honestly, I never expected Gilgamesh would be that crazy, and I never planned to wipe out their entire race either. It's just that they were way too arrogant and full of themselves. Their crazy challenges and rude behavior, cruelty and savagery, have to pay for what they did eventually. You take people and build an ark from the giant divine tree. For every living species in the world, save at least 1 pair of their seeds. Use the remaining space to bring people who are friends of Likidu and the forest on board the ark. I will immediately send a great flood to destroy the world. I turned around and left. The air was filled with trembling and excited voices. We lost the war, but our entire race won't be wiped out. There's still a spark of hope left for us. Thank the Creator for his mercy. This is all thanks to Forest King Likidu, who showed the Lord our goodwill. We are not savages. We are still worthy of redemption. We are not savages. We still deserve salvation. Praise Likidu. Praise the great king of the forest. The scribe in charge of steely inscriptions also wept for joy, watching the giant's back as he left. He waved his brush and ink and wrote in the Yanli Kingdom chapter of Genesis. The kindness of Forest King Likidu moved the god who was ready to destroy the world and left a way out for the Yanli people who tried to rebel against him. God ordered Xuanze to build an ark to escape the world-destroying great flood. I went back to my yard and tidied up a bit. I took out the high-pressure water gun that I put in the garden corner, which I bought with Su Qing, my next-door little sister, when we went shopping not long ago. I never thought it'd come in handy so soon. In just the 10 or so minutes I spent getting the water gun ready, 120 days had already passed in the sandbox. Countless people turned into sped-up after-images. They cut down the potted divine tree left from years ago and built a huge ark. They brought seeds of all living things and cubs of all kinds of giant beasts. All the species in the whole world were packed into this huge ark. Good thing the place isn't that big. Everyone lives pretty close together. Time to start the cleansing. I walked up to the sandbox. I lifted the high-pressure water gun from more than 10 meters away and sprayed it all the way across the area. The snow-white high-pressure water jetted towards the city-state civilization area in the orchard. Large swathes of trees fell down. The giant city collapsed in an instant. Countless animals ran out of the forest, trying to outrun the surging white flood behind them. But they got submerged in the end. It looked like the sky and earth changed color instantly. Everything was vast and snow-white. Xuanze led everyone to sit on the ark and stared at the sky in shock. It was an extremely horrifying sight, as if the entire great abyss and sky formed this terrifying scene. As if all the springs of the great abyss had burst open. The windows of heaven were opened. Countless surging snow-white water flows poured down from the clouds, washing over the entire land, except for the ark still floating above the water. The whole world was submerged in the vast expanse of white water. The huge flood was like a magnificent white waterfall, pouring down from the top of the sky. It submerged mountains, rivers, and land as it surged forward. What terrifying power that sent a world-destroying flood in the blink of an eye. On the deck, merchants, nobles, commoners, and slaves were all sighing in shock. They were the kindest, most harmonious group of people. God sent the flood to cleanse the sinful land. All the savage, cruel, and guilty people will be drowned in the flood. The day the great flood destroyed the world was called the Day of Disaster. The last glimmer of the Yanli civilization, Xuanze led the remaining Yanli people on the ark, aboard the last ark, to escape the great flood. In the empty corner of the ship, the scribe held a quill pen and wept bitterly, and slumped awkwardly on the deck, still lost in thought of that great magical figure. Our world has a round sky and a square earth. Our world was created by God. It only took 7 days. What an incredibly mighty power that is. Beiming's hands were trembling. His old eyes welled with murky tears. He started using his own imagination to quietly flesh out the 7 days of God's creation. He picked up his pen and wrote Genesis. This became the final record of God's 7-day creation. On the first day, God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God separated the light from the darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. On the second day, God separated the light from the darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. On the second day, God said, "Let there be an expanse between waters to separate them." So the sky was made, right? On the third day, God said, "Let all water under heaven gather in one place, and let dry ground appear." So water and dry land were separated. God called the dry land continents, and the gathered waters he called oceans. The fourth day, the fifth day, the sixth day, the seventh day. All things in heaven and earth were complete. God rested and blessed the previous 6 days on this day. In the following days, people took this historian's fantasy as truth, as if the Creator God had truly stood before mortals and explained his 7 creation days in detail. But why would God lower himself to these lowly mortals to explain exactly how he created the world? But people would rather believe this story, the story where God rested on the 7th day. People called this day the rest day, the holy day. And this became a local custom on this land. People also choose to rest on this day. I hosed the area for quite a while and stopped the high-pressure hose only when I missed nothing. I turned off the switch quietly and put it back in the utility room. That means we're doing a full reset again. Chongyuan's endless killing and overbreeding almost broke the sandbox. We leave 1 pair of each species now. The ecosystem will recover sooner or later. Hope after this time, they will be more alert, the creation mastermind said from the side. Even if we don't destroy them, they will destroy themselves anyway. Eat up all other species, then go extinct themselves. It's better to let them start fresh now. I let out a long sigh. I'm not as fragile as you think. I don't need comfort. I just feel a little upset, that's all. Chuang let out a sigh. I'm not as fragile as you think. I don't need comfort. I just feel a little bad, that's all. The creation mastermind continued. As a hive queen, you've bred countless people and races. You're a great creator. You should get used to countless races rising and perishing. Perish? A vein popped on my forehead. I corrected him. I'm a man. I'm the hive queen. Save your breath. They're all spores you bred one by one anyway. Family planning for the hive is super important, you know? I cut him off immediately and sat on the chair by the yard gate, quietly munching on a freshly peeled fruit. I'll go to town tomorrow to buy 2 gin of fruit. I have stomach cancer. I gotta take good care of my stomach. I picked up the black notebook after a long time and recorded on it. This is the giant beast era. I originally wanted to name this era the Beast Cretaceous, to match the dinosaur era of the Cretaceous period, but since the Yanli people recorded it as Genesis, I might as well name this era Genesis. The corresponding period on Earth's timeline is the end Cretaceous mass extinction. A meteorite fell from the sky and wiped out dinosaurs. But here, a flood fell from the sky and wiped out giant beasts and apes. In my evolution history, it's called the end Genesis mass extinction. I gathered my thoughts and turned to the 4th page after Dark Wu era, Wang Wu era, and New Birth era, and wrote down the 4th era. In Genesis era, intelligent species appeared. The ape tribe developed tribal and city-state civilizations, drove away giant beasts, and became the overlord of this era. But they were cruel and violent. The heavens couldn't tolerate that. A great flood fell from the sky and destroyed all living beings. The third mass extinction broke out, wiping out 99% of all species. After I finished recording the third mass extinction, I went to sleep. The next morning, when I got up to wash my face and brush my teeth, I felt a terrifying boiling power spreading all over my body. I was immediately shocked and hurried to examine my own body structure. This power is... I looked at myself in the mirror. I had grown a few centimeters taller out of nowhere. Reaching 1.3 meters, my facial features became softer and more handsome. With an elegant and deep aura, my body was strong and fit, like the perfect physique in Greek sculptures. I'm shredded when I take my shirt off. Look lean with clothes on. This is the feedback power granted by the third mass extinction event. It's way stronger than the previous two. I'm now as fit as some top athletes. I clenched my fists. I could feel explosive power surging through me. But this handsome look and perfect body proportion already makes me look like a perfect Norse god. But this gives me a huge headache instead. Changing so drastically all of a sudden, Suging's gonna lose her mind for sure. She'll definitely yell at me for using a photo editing hack. Oh no, people are gonna capture me for research. Can I modify my genes? I suddenly asked the creation core, change these dominant excellent appearance genes back. This perfect look is way too exaggerated and eye-catching. People would scream non-stop if they see me on the street. Honestly, I was already super happy with my old look. It's already hard enough for Suching and the village neighbors, especially the aunties, to get used to it. Now my look keeps changing again and again. I'm scared they'll get totally suspicious. Host has the natural ability to unlock gene locks.
You are a Zerg hero.
You can modify your own gene fragments. Do you want to integrate Zerg cells? I'm already a Zerg hero now. Actually, I was too weak physically before and couldn't accept the modification. Now that my physique is strong enough, I can take in Zerg cells. I didn't hesitate for long when choosing whether to stay human or not. I'd be dead anyway. Now that my physique is strong enough, I can take in Zerg cells. I didn't hesitate at all when making the choice. I didn't wait long at all. I would have lost my life anyway, waiting around to die from cancer. Being a normal person is no fun at all. Being a bug is way more fun. So I mumbled quietly, integrate Zerg cells. Fusion started. A searing, tearing pain hit me deep in my soul instantly. I broke out in cold sweat all over my body. I fell on the bed, screaming in pain. Then I blacked out right away. When I came to my senses, 3 hours had already passed. My whole body was covered in dark gray grime. I hurried to take a shower. Change my clothes before checking my body. My body feels different now. It has unlimited potential. I'm a real bug now. I have the Zerg's accelerated cell division talent. I can adjust my genes however I want. I closed my eyes slightly and saw in the dark space a twisted double helix DNA strand. Large chunks of useless junk in human genes. Information fragments have been cleared and optimized. Only the essence is kept. Most of the gene chain is blank. But when I tried to remove the cancer cells, the creation core gave me a cold response. Fundamental gene components cannot be removed. I took a deep breath. There's no way to remove human genes. I can only find a way to cure it. And the creation core told me a terrifying fact. Cancer cells are traitor cells in the human body. The stronger a person is, the stronger the cancer cells get. Which means when I get stronger, the cancer cells get stronger too. They're multiplying like crazy inside me. If during this mass extinction I had absorbed a little bit more power, I might have died right on the spot. I couldn't help but jump in fright. For now, I can't accept any feedback power from the fourth mass extinction event. I took a deep breath. I stayed on high alert. That is to say, in a short period of time, even if they run wild and tyrannize this land, I can't kill them as I please. I stayed on high alert. That is to say, in a short period of time, even if they run wild and tyrannize this land, I can't wipe them out in large numbers at will and reshuffle the whole world. I thought of Gilgamesh last night. His madness and struggle before he died also filled me with fear and awe of death. My gastric cancer has progressed from mid-stage to late stage. Death is the scariest thing for all living creatures. Can I really survive? I stood up and walked to the yard gate. I don't have much time left with late-stage cancer. I have to work as fast as possible in the next era to deduce racial civilization in the big sandbox and deduce extraordinary powers. find an extraordinary ability that can modify and fight against cancer cells. I looked at the sandbox. Everything is withered and dying. There's barely any sign of life. One night in the real world equals 40 to 50 years in the sandbox, but it still hasn't fully recovered yet. Only one pair of each species was left, and they're slowly reproducing again. And they also started heeding God's warnings. All living beings are equal, except for necessary food needs. They cut down on unnecessary killings. They even help reproduce some species to expand their populations. At the same time, all kinds of new species started popping up after the mass extinction, of all weird shapes and sizes. It looked like new life was budding after the apocalypse. Things had stabilized and started developing again, but it was still way too slow. My illness won't let me hold on that long. I sighed. Should I create a second sandbox and build a whole new world? I want to make a new world sandbox for evolution and let its civilizations develop extraordinary power systems. But that's obviously not very realistic. After all, the big sandbox in front of me has just shown the first buds of extraordinary power. I can't bite off more than I can chew. So I came up with another idea. Intelligence is unpredictable. It leads to many things that don't fit the theory of evolution. That being the case, maybe I should draw on other people's wisdom. It's too limiting if I just rack my brains alone. That being the case, maybe I should draw on other people's wisdom. It's too limiting if I just rack my brains alone. Why not pool everyone's ideas and get a bunch of people on board? Yeah, this time I want to go big. Evolving species all by myself is way too slow. It's better to get other people to help me work out the spore evolution rules. I remembered the sandbox game Spore I played before. Players start as spores, evolve and reproduce, and eventually turn into all kinds of creatures. I'll make a tiny mini sandbox. Can I make it like an online game? Let other people enter it via devices, treat the sandbox as a game, and evolve new species for me. The Zerg's technology can definitely do that, but it can't have the kill to level up mechanic. I nodded. This isn't a game in the first place. It's a real world. I plan to make it similar to the open sandbox game Minecraft. I'll enable 10,000x speed up for cell division for players. Let them evolve species on their own starting from the spore state. They're in full control of cell division, growth, evolution, aging, and death. To develop new species, you can finish a run of spore evolution in 2 or 3 days. This is just a random little idea I came up with. It won't take too much effort. The main focus is still on the big sandbox. I'll pick the most unique and promising races from each of their game sessions and add them to the big sandbox to improve the sandbox world. After all, only having one intelligent race, the Chongyuan, is way too monotonous. I already know that if one intelligent race becomes dominant, it can easily destroy the whole sandbox. How many days will this take to finish? About 3 days. We already have VR gaming glasses with current technology. They can be used as the access medium. So right in front of my house, I built a 30 square meter small sandbox. I picked up a hoe and followed the previous layout and easily built the sandbox environment. My health got better. Even though I still have a terminal illness, I have the strength to work now. I finished building the sandbox environment after 1 day. My health got better. Even though I still have a terminal illness, I've got energy to work. 1 day later, a veteran Steam player named Chen Wenshan was looking for niche new games when he found this VR game, Spore Evolution Beta version. The intro says it's a sandbox farming game. Start with 1 spore. Evolve your species. Unlimited possibilities. Top pick for casual gamers. He scoffed at it at first. Thought it was another clickbait from a Chinese game developer. But the huge 73G file size made him a little curious. After downloading and registering, he put on the VR glasses and entered the game. No way! I actually have physical sensations. It feels like I'm really swimming in the ocean. Chen Wenshan's mind went blank instantly. He knew he had stumbled on something unimaginable. But right after he entered the game, he couldn't see anything because he was still in spore form. Single-celled organisms need to first evolve eyes and a visual system. He died countless times, reproduced generation after generation, and finally evolved eyes. Then he grew a mouth and started hunting for food. But his species went extinct really fast. The eyes were too weak. He often couldn't see enemies coming and got ambushed. For this, he even went to the library for biological evolution materials. Half a day later, he finally evolved a species that could barely survive. Countless sticky tentacles surrounding a giant single eye. Underneath it is a small mouth full of sharp fangs. I finally pulled it off. Wow, Chen Wenshan was overwhelmed with a sense of achievement. He controlled his tentacle monster to crawl ashore. He was awestruck by the real sight of mountains and rivers. Meanwhile, I was sitting at the yard gate munching an apple and sunbathing, watching that weirdly shaped creature crawl ashore from afar. I was instantly confused. What kind of weird evolved species is this? Its eyes are scarily huge, taking up 2/3 of its entire body. Just how desperate is it to grow eyes, that it turned into this odd-looking species? Its eyes are scarily big, taking up 2/3 of its body. That's such a deep obsession with growing eyes. According to the theory of evolution, putting most nutrients into growing useless eyeballs will definitely get eliminated by nature. But I also find it really interesting. Doesn't this look like the blood-eyed demon from mythology? Just then, there was a knocking sound at the door. Suging came to bring me food. I stood up and walked towards the gate. I accidentally stepped right on that squint-eyed monster and killed it. It went splat and turned into a pile of mushy flesh. The word failure popped up again on Chen Wenshan's end. He was dumbfounded in an instant. His evolution was going perfectly well. He finally turned into a decent species, just crawled ashore ready to rule the world. How did he get stepped on and die out of nowhere? I opened the door. Sujing brought another batch of delicious meals. She peeked into the yard. "Why are you farming all alone and looking so happy?" "Not bad, farming makes me happy." She stared at me blankly, as if she was totally shocked. "Why do I keep feeling your temperament has changed? You've become so charismatic. You must have hacked your life, right?" Although I changed my appearance back to normal, after going through 3 mass extinction events, that detached, calm vibe is really hard to shake off. I just touched her forehead. "Are you feeling sick?" She got completely fooled by my random excuse. She could only switch to another topic. "Oh right, aren't you bored staying in the yard all day? Want to go shopping with me once in a while?" I looked at her, stunned for a second. "Are you serious? What about your ex-girlfriend? Why haven't I seen her come to keep you company? We broke up. We split after I got sick and resigned." "Oh, so you got terminal cancer when you were at your peak. Lost your job. Your girlfriend left you. You can only go back to the countryside to spend the rest of your life alone. That's so sad. I can be your girlfriend and stay with you before you die. It's kind of fulfilling my childhood wish. I used to work as a volunteer. I'm really good at taking care of terminally ill patients. I can cook for you and look after you as a terminally ill patient. I can make you nice meals, go shopping and chat with you, make you happy before you pass away, make me happy before I die." I was instantly speechless. Then I looked at her with a faint smirk. "Are you being serious? You want to fulfill all the duties of a girlfriend?" Suging shivered all of a sudden, quickly stepped back several steps, tightly clutching her clothes. "This is just a pure, innocent relationship. You're dying soon anyway. How dare you think about ruining my innocence? People talk about fake brothers all the time. We'll just be fake lovers. Fine, I'll be straight with you. There's a high school summer reunion in a few days. Come with me as my +1. You're super good looking. I'll definitely be the center of attention if I bring you. All my girlfriends will be so jealous of me. Come pick clothes with me. You're free most days anyway, and you have extra money to spare. Since you still have time now, why not spend it freely with me?" The second our eyes met, I knew I just fell right into her trap. This girl only came to me because she needs money for clothes and a fake boyfriend to show off. I got a fake girlfriend out of nowhere. It's like having an extra little nanny. This girl loses interest in things really fast, but she can cook nice meals for me every day, so I don't have to go to the county town to eat all the time. After all, stomach cancer requires a careful diet. The food outside is way too unhygienic. Back to business. I studied that evil-eyed creature. The individual I stepped on is dead. But its whole species is still in the small sandbox, and they're going extinct soon. After all, 2/3 of their body size is eyeball. They're destined to be eliminated by nature. Do they have any potential to become a supernatural species? This species has very simple thinking. They are violent and evil, but because of their oversized eyeballs, their psychic power is unexpectedly powerful. If we leave them be, they will definitely go extinct. But it might just be like the worm source. It's just way too weak in the early stage. It might become really powerful once it fully develops. I plan to introduce this species to the big sandbox. I will carve out an area in the 100-acre big sandbox and turn that area into a swamp. I'll use chicken manure and cow dung to make fertile rotting mud. It will ferment with microbes later and produce biogas, and eventually turn into a sticky, muddy swamp. Then I'll just put the evil eye creatures in there to live. There's no competition here. Even the weakest ones can breed in large numbers. As for whether they can become the first extraordinary monster later, that's totally up to them. As for the small sandbox side, the game blew up completely. The first player, Chen Wenshun, posted a detailed review on the forum. The core point is it has 100% realistic touch. You get the exact feeling of whatever creature you evolve into. If you die, you have to create a new account. There are no guides or walkthroughs at all. He even wrote at the end of the review, "My goal is to evolve into the legendary dragon, then fly to that yard and shit on the head of the giant, who's peeling apples. He wants to shit on my head. The last species that dared to provoke me like that. You know what happened to it, right? I silently wrote this debt down in my mind. In just one day, all 100 slots for the small sandbox were filled up. Thousands of people online signed a petition asking for more closed beta slots. So you think there are too few slots? Not my problem. I'm not even making money off this game from you guys. You can give all the suggestions you want. I lose if I adopt even one of them. I'm too lazy to expand it. It's just a little side project to begin with. Even if you make a huge fuss over it, it's useless. Unless there's some unexpected surprise. It'll stay in closed beta forever. Let's shift focus back to the big sandbox. That's my real proper work. The Yanli people from the last era, strictly speaking, only produced 3 extraordinary creatures, including Gilgamesh. For the next civilization, I want them to develop a mature extraordinary cultivation system, preferably evolve into a wizard civilization. Gilgamesh once hired the court black wizards to research longevity potions. That's the prototype of wizards. I hope a great wizard will appear, who's good at alchemy and potion making, and can create something that can cure cancer. To build a complete extraordinary system, the sandbox is bound to need all kinds of mysterious and dangerous extraordinary creatures. As research materials for the wizards, I looked at the swamp mud in the big sandbox. One day has passed. The evil eyes have already bred in large numbers, and even evolved special individuals. I was slightly pleased. Over 100 years have passed. Since there are no natural enemies in the new environment, the evil eyes multiplied like crazy. They were everywhere. But soon, due to overbreeding, the internal competition pressure grew, and food became scarce. They started killing each other and feeding on their own kind. Gradually, a unique evil eye appeared. It had a strange psychic power. Any creature it stared at would be charmed and walk right up to it to become its food. This first-generation extraordinary evil eye quickly rose to the top and became the overlord of the swamp ecosystem. Since it had no natural enemies, it bred crazily. Survival of the fittest, ordinary evil eyes were soon slaughtered in large numbers. The whole swamp was filled with evil eye offspring with charm abilities. The extraordinary species finally developed violent psychic powers. I was slightly shocked. It wasn't until after the 4th epoch that the first extraordinary species was finally born. Just then, I looked at the big sandbox. Something drastic happened again. A group of worm sources had already ventured into that swampy, muddy area. Over 200 years have passed. Several generations have lived since the Great Flood. The successors of the Yanli tribe, after they started wearing animal skins and clothes, they no longer needed thick natural fur to keep warm. Their black body hair gradually decreased. Their thin outer carapace disappeared. Their bodies started to become upright, and their snow-white skin began to show. Oh right, their snow-white skin was exposed. They evolved from apes with thick fur to subhumans with sparse hair. Their body types became more and more similar to sturdy, strong Western people. They once had a glorious city-state civilization, but now they're still stuck in crude farming tribal societies. All their glory was built upon the hero, King Gilgamesh's legacy. That great hero, King suppressed all giant beasts across the land on his own, which let the Yanli race become the top of the food chain. But without the hero king, they have nothing. They can't progress to the Bronze or Iron Age, relying only on crude stone spears and sticks. How can they fight against the giant beasts? The one and only sacred sword of civilization, EEI, has sunk permanently along with Gilgamesh into the endless deep sea of the apocalyptic Great Flood. Right now, Mug's daughter of the Babylon tribe chief is sighing. Civilization is so magnificent. That was an epic era belonging to only one person. The great hero, King Gilgamesh. No wonder people back then wrote epics for him, to record all his glory. Our era has fallen. It's heading for decline. If the God-given sword of civilization hadn't been lost, even without the great power of the blood of strength, we wouldn't be having such a tough time. Civilization is the protective power hidden in our wisdom. I, Moog, want to find the path forward for our civilization. How on earth are we supposed to survive? Muge has a calm look on her face. She's the bravest and wisest person in the tribe. She's not as physically strong as the men, but her combat skills let her defeat most of the warriors in the tribe. She looks at several burly men in animal hides beside her. How's the exploration of this area going? The surrounding area is all marshland. A warrior answers. This is a vast muddy swamp. It probably formed from accumulated puddles after the Great Flood. It's full of all kinds of species. There are lots of delicious fruits here. I used chicken poop and cow dung to make this fertile swampland, so the plants here grow extra vigorously. Muge takes a deep breath, staring at the vast black mud pit in front of her. She was just about to list this place as the tribe's next foraging spot when she suddenly realized something was wrong. Wait, 2 people are missing. Everyone around looked at each other in shock. This has never happened before. That's weird. Giant beasts are too big to step into the swamp. They'd just sink. There's no trace of giant beasts around. It can only be small swamp creatures attacking us secretly. Muge makes a quick decision to evacuate with over 20 people. But right at that moment, suddenly emerged from the swamp mud a disgusting, bizarre gray-black tentacle monster. All its tentacles look like gray seaweed, surrounding a huge bloodshot scarlet eyeball that takes up 2/3 of its body. So pretty. How can there be such a beautiful girl in the world? Several burly men in animal hides suddenly locked eyes with that eerie, bloodshot giant eye. It was like they saw a peerless beauty. They were so excited no one could hold them back. They walked over in a frenzy. What are you doing? Don't go over there. Muge instantly realized what was going on. Those creepy giant eyeballs can actually charm prey into approaching voluntarily. The 2 missing people probably walked right into the trap and went straight to their deaths. She made a snap decision, abandoning the few charmed men and leading everyone else to run away quickly. But right then, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. Her eyes lit up with excitement. What an amazing creature. They're even weaker than we are. Weak, floppy tentacles and stupid giant eyeballs. Yet they have this terrifying, unbelievable power that can destroy creatures stronger than themselves. Aren't we just as weak too? Why do only they have this unique power? It seemed like there was an unknown flame burning in Muge's eyes. A terrifying idea sprung up in her mind. I'm going to take its power and revitalize the tribe. Kill it first, then we run away. Everyone was shocked. She turned around and raised her white stone spear high. A ray of light shone down from the sky, falling on her stunning cold face, just like the war goddess from Norse mythology. Come with me, kill it. I'm going to bring its corpse back to the tribe. But more of these creatures are coming towards us. Someone roared, looking into the depths of the black swamp. More giant-eyed tentacle monsters are wiggling their sticky tentacles and crawling slowly. Even though their movements are ridiculously slow, their weird power is terrifyingly strong. Once we're surrounded by these giant eyeballs, even if it costs us our lives, we have to kill at least one. Muge lifted her stone spear, turning into the bravest warrior of the tribe, and charged straight forward. With just one spear strike, accompanied by a sharp, hoarse scream like a crying baby, that fragile giant eyeball exploded instantly. The stench was overwhelming. Right at that moment, she suddenly stopped walking, her eyes burning with passion. What an incredible creature. They are even weaker than us. Weak, floppy tentacles and stupid giant eyeballs. But they have terrifying, unbelievable power that can destroy creatures far stronger than themselves. Aren't we just as weak as them? Why do only they get this unique kind of power? It looked like there was something in Muge's eyes, a nameless torch burning fiercely. A terrifying idea popped up in her mind. I'm going to take its power and revitalize our tribe. Kill it first, then we run. Everyone was completely shocked. She turned around and raised her white stone spear high. A ray of light shone down from the sky and fell on her stunning cold face, just like the war goddess from Norse mythology. Follow me, kill it. I will bring its corpse back to the tribe. But more of these creatures are coming towards us. Someone roared and stared deep into the black swamp. More big-eyed tentacle monsters are squirming their slimy tentacles and crawling slowly. Though their movements are ridiculously slow, their weird powers are insanely terrifying. Once we get surrounded by these big-eyed freaks, even if we have to pay the price of death, we have to kill at least one of them. Mugu lifted her stone spear and turned into the tribe's bravest warrior. She charged straight ahead with just one spear strike, followed by a sharp, hoarse scream like a crying baby. That fragile big eye burst open instantly. The fishy stench was overwhelming, turning into disgusting sticky slime, splattering all over Muge's face. Take it away. She lifted the corpse's slimy tentacle with one hand, turned around quickly, only to find they were surrounded by 7 or 8 evil eyes. Her face turned pale with despair. Follow me. Fight our way out. This was a brutal, bloody battle. Almost the entire 30-person hunting team was killed. They could have run away for sure, but they delayed and got surrounded. In the end, only 3 survivors escaped this demon swamp that seemed cursed by death. They are all dead. Even Muge, this extremely tough woman, couldn't help sobbing and shedding tears. All these years, the tribe's brave men have mostly died hunting giant beasts. Our tribe of nearly 1,000 only has 100 strong men left. Now we lost another third of them. We are almost facing extinction, but our race will die sooner or later anyway. We might as well go all in. Manga took a deep breath and looked at the Evil Eye's corpse. She hoped this creature we traded such a huge price for would have useful evil blood. All these years, countless people tried fusing with all kinds of giant beast blood, hoping to be like Gilgamesh and have the power of the hero king. But except for the divine beast's power blood, everyone else died. It seems only special creature blood can possibly work. Maybe these special creatures' blood can become another kind of power blood. When Mugo returned to the tribe with the few remaining people, her father was already on the verge of collapse. Are you crazy? Do you know what you are doing? The burly middle-aged man wore black animal hide, gasping heavily from the higher ground. Are you insane? Do you know what you are doing? The burly middle-aged man wore black animal hide, gasping heavily from the higher ground. I'm not crazy, we have no way out already. Instead of waiting to die, we might as well fight to the death, to have a second Gilgamesh, lead our civilization to glory. This is the only way we won't go extinct. That's impossible. The chief shook his head slowly. Only the legendary God-given power. Blood can bring great power, not to mention this disgusting monster. Even if we successfully get that power, the gods will punish us. Power has no good or evil. Those with bright and great power blood can also become tyrants, wielding the holy sword of civilization, to challenge the almighty gods and those with dark power. If they keep a kind heart, can still protect the people. These monsters are weaker than us, but they have unbelievable power. If we can have the same power, the chief fell silent, gasping heavily. This will be a more important decision than his own death. He suddenly looked down at his stubborn daughter, choked up and said, "But we don't have enough people left for testing." For 200 years, generations of brave and wise chiefs let young people try to fuse with giant beast blood. Generations of people rushed in selflessly and died in the process. That's why our population is so small now. Manga took a deep breath. We don't have enough able-bodied men, but we have enough elderly children and women. All these years, men have been protecting women. This time, it's women's turn to step up. And if women die, and if large numbers of women die, we will have fewer burdens left. This time, the women of the tribe will go to die for us. The tent fell dead silent for half a day. Bright torches burned high above the tribe. Mugu gathered all the people together. If we don't want to go to total ruin, if we want to restore the glory of the Yanli people, if we want to see the birth of the great next hero king, death can never crush our shoulders and will... The great hero king Gilgamesh once said, humanity's history of fighting against nature is a history of courage and praise. And today, history will record our courage on this very day, early tomorrow morning. We hope you will step forward for the sake of the tribe. The hymn of humanity is the hymn of courage. The women below held their children in their arms in silence. Everyone knew there was almost no chance of coming back alive. That night, countless women said goodbye to their husbands and kids. After crying their hearts out, they chose to take the test without hesitation. Over countless days and nights, their husbands had died, their fathers had died, and their sons would die in the future too. What did they have left at all? All they had left was themselves. There was no one left to protect them anymore. The only ones who could protect them were themselves. This day was destined to be soaked in blood and cruelty. Countless women walked out resolutely to try fusing with the evil eye blood. More than 400 corpses were scattered all across the ground. The whole place was full of twisted corpses with pained expressions. But in the end, 3 women actually survived. Muge and 2 others named Circe and Xuangying. The 3 of them were forever remembered as female pioneers. Mugu and the other 2 were named Circe and Xuangying. The 3 of them were permanently carved onto the ancient stone wall. On the Babylonian murals, In the pool of blood from countless suffering women, only these 3 strong women stood on top of the corpses bathed in blood. The 3 stood in a circle and lifted up high together a huge, fiercely burning torch. Later generations called this sacred ancient mural the 3 Witches. They passed on the flame of civilization. In the days that followed, these 3 great and determined women led the tribe's civilization forward once again. They began to possess a strange kind of psychic power, powerful and sharp, mysterious and evil, just like the evil eye itself. They gradually gained the ability to fight against giant beasts. They stayed at the back using psychic power to interfere with the giant beasts, while the warriors holding stone axes fought in the front line. But their powerful psychic power also made them often unable to control their energy fluctuations. Even when they got intimate with men, they would accidentally, out of excitement, shatter the other person's mind and kill them, so they all remained chaste women. They couldn't get along with men, so they were lonely, proud, and no one dared to get close to them. Muga had a strong sense of honor and mission. She led the tribe to launch wars, holding a wooden staff to fight against giant beasts. Xuangying had a gentle and easygoing personality. She liked leading the women to herd livestock, grow medicinal herbs, and treat the injured people. Circe was the only exception. She was originally a married woman. She accidentally killed her husband when they were intimate, but she had extremely strong desires. Once she got a taste of it, she couldn't stop. She secretly used psychic power just like the evil eye to charm the men in the tribe and slept with them wantonly. But she couldn't help killing them constantly. Mysterious deaths of men started appearing in the tribe. People secretly cursed Circe. But Circe held a deep grudge against them. She used psychic power to curse those who resisted. All the men that defied her gave them splitting headaches and dark bruised eye sockets, which Circe gradually became the tribe's synonym for evil and terror. The other 2 couldn't talk her out of her actions, and they couldn't team up to kill her either, because they needed her power to protect the tribe. Because of Circe's tyrannical rule, the status of women became very high. The 3 of them were called witches in the tribe, symbolizing power, evil, mystery, fear, and omnipotence. From this day onward, the tribe entered the witch era ruled by women. Records from the Spear of the Holy Witch state the Babylon tribe suffered from a beast disaster. Male population was extremely low. Women drank the evil eye blood, and the great 3 witches appeared. Mugi the war witch was in charge of chaotic war and glory. Circe the curse witch was in charge of the prison of chaos and curses. Xuangying the spring witch was in charge of occult medicine and livestock herding. I laughed out loud. I had waited silently for more than 3 days, which was more than 300 years in their world. Finally, after clinging to life through the Great Flood, signs of revival finally emerged. People who had integrated the 2nd gene actually appeared. They chose the evil eye. Gilgamesh integrated the 2nd gene, the termite gene, giving him super strength. And this group of women called witches integrated the evil eye gene, possessed psychic powers. If that evil eye species hadn't been the first supernatural species in the sandbox, it would never have sparked the path to transcendence. This evil eye big eyeball monster is such a huge surprise for me. I sat at the yard gate munching on an apple. Turns out racking my brain alone is way too hard. Pooling collective wisdom and drawing on other people's ideas. Actually, termite genes are far too other people's wisdom. Actually, termite genes are extremely strong. They require an overly large blank gene fragment. Normal people barely have such a large blank gene segment. Evil eye genes, by contrast, are much weaker. They don't need a large segment, and their emergence success rate is much higher. Only 3 emerged out of 400 deaths, but they are way weaker than Gilgamesh. They even need warriors to cooperate to fight ordinary giant beasts. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, can conquer the whole world alone. Their use of psychic power is very crude. Though they are also studying witchcraft and herbal medicine, their progress is still too slow. I thought for a moment, went back to my room to search online. Turns out the West has yoga meditation methods. The East has Taoist internal cultivation visualization practices. Both are for training the mind. Give them the basics of meditation, and let them develop a complete wizard cultivation path. When starting a new path, feeling your way forward blindly and hitting walls everywhere is super tough. But once you have a direction, progress will definitely be countless times faster. But how do I meet these 3 witches? Disguise as a wise giant beast and deliver the treasure. That's definitely not going to work. It's not like I can directly control the tiny creatures in the sandbox to act for me. Just as I was thinking, I noticed that in the small sandbox, a group of leading hardcore players had already climbed onto land. They discovered there really was an incomparably huge giant, sitting on a sky-high chair in the distance eating an apple. Looking deep in thought, this sandbox game is so freaking fun. Our lore says we really are evolved bugs in a yard. Are we supposed to fight back against the giant? 3 or 4 players, all weird-looking, whispered to each other. They thought the freedom level was terrifyingly high. Observe from the shadows. We're no match for him right now. Don't get close to him. If we get stepped on and die, there's no use crying about it. A group of players lay in the coastal woods observing secretly. If we get stepped on and die, there's no use crying about it. A group of players lay in the coastal woods, observing in secret, and pointing at me while whispering, "What a bunch of dumbasses." I sat in the yard looking into the distance, watching a bunch of tiny ants whispering about me. They really think they're the main characters here to beat the big boss. Knock, 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 there was a knock at the door. Susan came to deliver food. Whatever, let's eat first. I stood up. Holy shit. Was that an earthquake? No, he just stood up. Run! Don't get stepped on and die. A bunch of weird-looking creatures scampered for their lives across the land. Behind them, a colossal cloud-sized, towering giant walked slowly over. Each step spanned thousands of miles. He easily stepped over their heads and walked far away. When he came back, he was holding a blue lunchbox in his hand and sat back in his chair to eat. I ate the homemade farm food while continuing to think about how to pass the meditation, knowledge to the 3 witches of the Babylon tribe. Meanwhile, the players hiding in the small woods snuck out again and huddled together. This boss actually has cutscenes. He's eating. Let's lay low and grind for now. I watched this bunch of ants planning how to beat me and was immediately speechless. Suddenly, I had a brainwave. Oh right, the Evolution Sandbox game. I can just go through the player channel, evolve from the bun into a tiny creature, and I can enter the big sandbox. I was super excited. Sure enough, building the small sandbox back then was a smart move. But if I'm going to enter in person, I naturally need to clear the area first. The next second, an announcement popped up in front of all players. Urgent game maintenance. Log out immediately in 3 seconds. As soon as the announcement came out, the entire sandbox erupted in chaos. Stupid devs. 3 seconds is basically no warning at all. Once the 3 seconds passed, everything went black. Countless people took off their VR sets. The screen isn't black. Countless people took off their VR glasses and almost smashed their devices. They had no idea at all that it was their silly chattering right in front of me that made me remember they existed. They totally brought this on themselves. The forums are full of people cursing the devs like crazy, but that can't diminish their enthusiasm for the game. That Chen Wenshen, known as the Akina Speeder, is still on the forum analyzing how to take me down. He's eating right now. We can evolve a potent neurotoxin, then blow ourselves up and jump into his lunchbox, so he will eat us. At the very least, we'll give him bad diarrhea. I'll evolve a highly toxic species that looks like shit. Poison hidden inside the shit. I was stunned. This dude tried to shit on my head last time. Now he wants to put poison-laced shit in my food. I quietly wrote this down on my grudges list again. Hey dude, you better pray for your own luck from now on. After forcing the small sandbox offline, I carried a white rubber hose onto the sandbox. I used this hose to secretly bury it under the ground between the 2 sandboxes, an underground pipeline more than 10 meters long. Connecting the 2 worlds, this is my exclusive VIP channel. No one can enter without my permission. Then I went back to my room, put on my VR glasses, and registered a player account. I write down everyone who insults me in my little notebook. Logged into the game. It was pitch black in front of my eyes. After staying dark for quite a while, the species I evolved finally reached the shore. This body, I looked at myself and those bizarre bodies same as other players. A 3-eyed crow holding a black spear. A vertical pupil between 2 normal eyes. Covered in black feathers all over. Still can't fly yet. Can only glide 3 to 4 meters at low altitude. Damn, this crow is as ugly as the big-eyed monster. According to the rule, the uglier, the stronger. Its potential should be equally great, right? As ugly as the big-eyed monster. According to the rule, the uglier, the stronger. Its potential should be equally great, right? The creator brain immediately gave me a harsh blow. It most likely has no extraordinary potential. It's just a deformed, failed evolution, totally disappointing. But on second thought, that makes sense. Every life's evolution is unique. The big-eyed monster is a miracle born of countless coincidences. It's very hard to replicate, but I don't have high requirements. As long as it can move, that's enough. I entered the secret pipeline between the two sandboxes. After traveling through the long, dark tunnel, light gradually appeared in front of my eyes. When I came back to my senses, I was already in a dense forest. The trees were thick and lush. The earth was covered in green. Terrible giant beasts were roaring and chasing in the distance. A magnificent vast scene of primitive forest. I finally entered my own sandbox. I lifted my 2 crow claws, walking in an arrogant, swaggering pace, heading straight for the Babylon tribe. The houses in Babylon tribe are neatly arranged and have flourished to a considerable level. The 3 witches' power is far weaker than Gilgamesh's, but they can barely resist giant beast invasions. Humans are in the middle of the giant beast food chain. They can't resist the most terrifying giant beasts, but won't be eaten randomly either. After stabilizing their survival, they reproduce like crazy because they need a huge population base to produce more witches. Deep in the green mountain stream outside the tribe, in a fairy tale-like water pool, 3 beautiful women are taking a bath. Over 10 years have passed. The 3 witches from back then are now over 30 years old. On Chongyuan, people usually die of old age at 30 or 40. Almost all their peers have passed away, but time seems to leave no trace on them at all. They are full of youthful energy, have fit and healthy figures, just like teenage girls. Back then, Gilgamesh merged his second, Gene. After that, he lived for more than 200 years. They are only in their 30s now. Their long lives have just begun. Mugi soaked in the clear spring and said lazily, "Another one passed away last night." The sisters who grew up with us back then are already gray-haired. Such a long time has passed. We just realized only the bond between us 3 sisters is eternal. Everything around is changing. Only we never grow old. What's wrong, 2 elder sisters? You're so high and mighty. As Babylon's patron deities, but still all alone. Aren't you jealous of ordinary girls who have husbands and kids? Circe, show some respect. After seeing Circe fall into depravity back then, they swore 3 iron rules for witches. First, you must be a virgin before accepting the evil eye's blood. Remain chaste for life. No loved ones allowed. After becoming a witch, contact with any men is forbidden. Third, witches are not allowed to abuse power to hurt others. Circe is a typical negative example. Her mental power is way too strong. So strong that she can't control random emotional outbursts, which will kill weak men. Over the past 10 years, several men in the tribe die inexplicably every month. 4 new witches have emerged over these years. No more shortage of combat power. Muge and Shuangyin decided to take action to suppress Circe. But after the fierce battle, they were horrified to find Circe had secretly become way stronger than them. Only their combined force can suppress her. It seems that compared to good witches who hold themselves back, the evil witch Circe indulges her spirit willfully, which actually makes her mental power grow stronger and stronger. Another 5 years passed. The 16th year of the Babylon era, Circe's power was already unfathomable. The 2 working together could only barely fight her evenly. Come on, you really don't want to give it a try. Instead of suppressing yourself, you might as well indulge yourself. No, this method is a wrong path. We have to figure out the correct spiritual cultivation method for witches. Since I can't convince you, I have to take forceful action.
Circe's face gradually turned cold and gloomy.
An extremely icy mental aura spread out from her body. The surrounding water waves rolled away layer by layer. You are actually this strong. Moog and Shuangyin's expressions changed drastically. Attack! 4 newly born witches appeared beside the water pool, holding black crutches in their hands. Muge had been prepared for this long ago, planning to join all witches' power to defeat Circe. So what if you all join forces? Circe struck out a palm with her raging mental power. Water splashed violently under the impact. Spine-tailed fish were shocked so hard that their bellies turned white. So this is the power of witches. A sudden gentle voice came over. A strange creature never seen before. A 3-eyed raven with black feathers had quietly stood on the lush tree at some point, watching everything happening between them. Who's there? The witches were shocked and their minds raced. This place is surrounded by a mental aura field. No man could sneak close, but right now, let's join forces to kill her first. All witches, including Circe, attacked at the same time. Strong mental impacts converged into one spot. Even the most terrifying giant beast would die instantly. But when this force hit the 3-eyed black raven, it made no sound at all. How is that possible? All witches stared at the raven with dry and hoarse throats. The same thought echoed in all their minds at the same time. What kind of power is this? This is the power of meditation. The witches stared at the raven with dry and hoarse throats. The same thought echoed in all their minds. What kind of power is this? This is the power of meditation. I say this as I stand on the tree branch. Of course, it's not the power of meditation. They rely on mental power for their abilities. With the help of the creator brain, they definitely can't hurt me. Actually, I'm just an ordinary, deformed, weak little bird. Who are you? This is the first time the witches have seen an intelligent species that can speak other than humans. They thought of the ancient myths. Intelligent species other than humans are the great wise giant beasts, also known as the Lord of Creation. You are a god. God? If that's what you think, then I am a god. I am one of the intelligent species once created by the Lord of Creation. Different from you. Though I am powerful, I have no ability to reproduce. I am one of a kind. I was appointed as the god of wisdom in charge of all living beings in the world. Xuanmo. You can also call me by another name. Motuli. I came here to light the fire for the backward Babylon tribe and bring you the truth of the world. What is the truth of the world? Truth is all the rules of the world. The source of all power, everything you see, is covered within the scope of truth. I want to teach the mortals on the ground the triple truth knowledge of meditation, alchemy, and witchcraft. Meditation, alchemy, witchcraft. The crowd's expressions changed completely. Back then, Gilgamesh received 3 civilization treasures as a gift. Now they are about to get the triple knowledge of truth. We actually encountered the legendary miracle. It feels like a dream. First, meditation is the way to cultivate your spirit. It gives you the foundation to become a god and leads you to the path of great beings like us. Second, alchemy is the mysterious study of creating unknown life, the way to pry open the door of truth. All things in the world reinforce and counteract each other and can be exchanged for one another. That is the principle of alchemy. The secret of alchemy. All things in the world reinforce and counteract each other and can be exchanged for one another. That is the principle of alchemy. All secrets of alchemy are contained in the Trinity formula. One substance pleases another substance. One substance restrains another substance. One substance dominates another substance. They half understood what they heard and were completely captivated by it. Their faces were tense, afraid of misremembering even a single word. Third, witchcraft is a kind of magical power. It allows your spirit to separate earth from fire and separate fire from the ocean. Following this principle, from that one singular substance, many extraordinary transformations will take place. The 3-eyed raven on the tree suddenly fell to the ground. After saying all that, I left the sandbox world directly from above the raven. I logged off and exited the game interface and put down my VR headset. Finally got that done. I memorized it so many times, I was scared I'd mispronounce a word. Acting isn't my strong suit. If it wasn't for curing my illness, I wouldn't have bothered memorizing all those lines. I have to guide the development of civilization and be the creator without revealing I'm a total weakling. It's such a hassle. Honestly, a terrifying guy like Gilgamesh. If he showed up in front of me in real scale, he could crush me to death with one slap. Even the power the 3 witches have was earned through countless near-death experiences. They're transcendent beings I could never catch up to. Yet I have to fool them. It gives me a headache just thinking about it. I'm basically just a regular guy, you know. I took a shower after logging off and restarted the small sandbox game. Barely a few minutes later, all the players logged back on, cussing nonstop while grinding the game like crazy, trying to evolve new species, using an entire world for sandbox civilization simulation, just to find a way to cure my terminal illness. I bet such a crazy move. No one else in the world has ever done it, right? But this path is really tough to walk. The seed has already been planted. Among the 3 types of knowledge, I'm most looking forward to the alchemy system. Among the 3 types of knowledge, I'm most looking forward to alchemy, like making potions and magic elixirs, to research a cure for cancer, but alchemy only exists in myths. I'm afraid it'll be really hard to make it real. But meditation and witchcraft should work. Yoga meditation and Eastern Qigong inner vision are similar practices. Improving health and expanding your spirit is a sure thing. As for witchcraft, once your mental strength is high enough, you'll naturally develop all kinds of subtle uses for it. Preparations are all done. Now we just see how far they can develop.
It's just a pity there are still too few transcendent species.
Like the evil eye and similar creatures. We need more of them to get better inspiration. I sighed and looked at those players. Come on, guys, put some effort into it. These guys never focus on properly evolving species with transcendent potential. They only think about cheap tricks and mess with me every other day. A bunch of jerks. I gotta find a way to squeeze every bit of use out of you. Just then, Suqing's voice came from the door. Chengja, you promised to come to my classmate gathering with me. It's time to go. I was stunned for a second before I realized going into the city to relax sounds nice. I put on the new clothes I bought earlier and walked out in big strides. Holy crap, the giant's out again. Run! Attack on Titan is here again. I have 6 legs. I just need to run faster than you guys. A bunch of ants on the ground were yelling and screaming and sprinting like crazy. I didn't have the intention to step on them on purpose. I was just thinking about how to fully make use of these free intelligent laborers as I left the house. Sugum was already waiting at the door on her electric scooter. The two of us went into the city and arrived at a large private room on the second floor of a mid-range restaurant. I pushed open the door and saw a bunch of young, energetic guys and girls sitting around the table eating and chatting. The second I walked in, the whole private room exploded. Who's this? Did you walk into the wrong room? Suging walked out from behind me. She was pretty satisfied with the dramatic reaction. This is my boyfriend, Lin Chen. He's super handsome. Wow, you're really showing off, huh? A bunch of girls gathered around, chattering away as they checked me out. I sat there quietly. I knew coming with this girl was just to let her show off, even though I adjusted my face back to how it was before. After 3 mass species extinctions, too many useless genes were discarded, and my body has already reached a perfect form. That transcendent aura can't be hidden. A few guys looked unhappy and came over to make me drink. I didn't refuse any of them. I've been working for several years. What haven't I seen before? These simple young guys don't have any bad intentions, but my current body basically can't get drunk. After I made 3 or 4 of them pass out drunk, no one dared to come over again. After dinner, we went to sing KTV. I sat on the sofa in the private room scrolling through my phone quietly, waiting for Suqing to get tired of singing so I can send her home, but I casually glanced at a few guys next to me. The live stream they're watching is actually Bowsy Evolution. That's so crazy. It really has endless possibilities. It's probably like a supercomputer running real-time evolution. This player is so dumb. I'd do way better than him if I played. I really hope it launches open beta. No way that's happening. Some big shots analyze there won't be a large-scale open beta. The computing load for a virtual reality world is way too high. Actually, the player capacity issue doesn't exist at all. 'Cause this isn't a virtual world. It's a real world. No server-side evolution is required. The only thing that limits player count is my will. This game is so hardcore. Those 100 players are so trash. They should let pros handle all these builds. A student nearby who majors in natural evolution is looking on with an envious face. If I played, I'd definitely evolve professional-grade species. Let the pros take over. I was slightly startled. That one sentence was a total wake-up call. I already figured out what I need to do. I brought the girl out to unwind this time. It was definitely worth the trip.